Welcome back to the Customer Success Festival APAC Reloaded. I hope you enjoyed the event so far. Again, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all speakers, attendees, and partners. If you do like our content, please head over to customersuccesscollective.com and check out our membership plan. With the CSC membership, you'll be able to have full access to on-demand videos, templates, framework, exclusive articles, and also rewatch all the presentation videos of this event. Now it's time, sit back and enjoy the next session. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the first session of Day 2 Customer Success Festival 2022. It is my huge honor to present you the first speaker of today, Mark. I'm the Customer Success Lead from Analyze AI. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me today, Ryan.
Thanks, Mark. And Mark will be presenting how to leverage behavioral science in customer success. So for all our live audience today, you are in for a treat. Show us some love in the chat, and then there will be a live Q&A session after the keynote as well. So again, please feel free to put on your comments, your feedback, and your questions on the chat, and then Mark will go back to those. For now, the stage is yours, Mark. Please take it from here.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ryan. And yes, thanks again for the opportunity to present to the conference today. I'm really excited to present on something that I'm particularly interested in and passionate in, and that's really looking at how can we leverage behavioral science techniques to really drive adoption of new technologies, and in particular, artificial intelligence within the healthcare industry. So as part of today, over the course of the next 20 minutes, I wanted to look at designing a customer experience for the very first time, us being a startup here at Analyze AI, and then looking at how you can really leverage those behavioral science techniques. To begin with, a little bit about myself. So I have a background as a healthcare professional. I've been in the health tech industry now for over 10 years. And I pivoted my career towards the technology side of the industry. I have experience in business development, management, strategy, and of course, customer success. Prior to my role here at Analyze AI, I worked for Philips Healthcare for 7.5 years in a variety of different customer success and client-facing roles. I've been with Analyze AI now for close to 18 months and really came on board to look at how we develop our deployment strategy for our new technology, but also to build out our customer success function across onboarding, technical support, and obviously success. A little bit about our company. You may not have heard of us. We have only been around for a couple of years, but Analyze AI is a joint venture between our parent technology company, Harrison AI, and IMED Radiology here in Australia. Our parent technology company, Harrison AI, is backed by leading investors, not only here locally in Australia, but also internationally with investors behind the likes of Spotify and Zoom. IMED are the largest provider of radiology services here in Australia and one of the largest worldwide. And through that partnership, what it allows us to is we have access to a plethora of data to actually develop our artificial intelligence algorithms. But not only that, we're able to co-develop our products with clinicians to really make sure that we're developing products that really have clinical benefits for patients. So what do we actually do? So this slide here just provides, I suppose, an insight into what our product looked like. But we developed comprehensive AI solutions for radiology. Our first product, our chest X-ray algorithm, identifies up to 124 findings in the chest. So it really covers a whole range of clinical findings and pathologies and really enables clinicians to make more accurate diagnoses. So in some regards, what we are attempting to do here at Analyze is quite futuristic. If I look to some of our closest competitors, they really only have a handful of findings within this particular area. And so we're really sort of charting a new frontier and really bringing AI to clinicians and really realizing those clinical benefits for patients. but it's not without its challenges. And I think if we look at AI more broadly, there's been a lot of controversy and also resistance, particularly within healthcare. Talk still continues today that, we're at risk of being replaced. Having robots actually do the roles of healthcare professionals, and certainly coming in to Annalise AI and actually looking at how do we deploy and really drive adoption of our new technology. This was certainly something that was certainly in the back of my mind. I think if we also look at the research as well, there's a lot of research that has even looked into this. Even a study as recently as last year in Europe surveyed close to 2,000 radiologists. And what they found was that over 50% really had this fear of replacement. So it is very much a real concern. It's been a real concern. It's been around ever since AI started to be thought of as a technology for clinicians. But it continues and it persists today. And I think that is really sort of the challenge that we were presented with. And so when I started at Annalise 18 months ago, really the problem to solve was how do we implement and adopt AI technology at scale, but also as a new market entrant. We haven't entered the market before now. We don't really have that brand recognition. And how do we do this? We really have one opportunity to enter the market and really make sure that clinicians adopt our product. And so if I look at our very first deployment here in Australia with our joint venture partner, we were tasked with deploying our solution across over 250 clinics here in Australia and getting the product in the hands of almost 350 radiologists. So quite a significant challenge that really needed to be thought out and developed how we actually tackle this. And I suppose this really brings me to sort of the first part, and that's really about how do you design an initial customer experience. Being a new market entrant, you've got the opportunity to do things differently as well. And I think that was really sort of what we were tasked with. And I think underpinning all of this, customer discovery is really key. So if I look at the process that we took to really determine how we implement, how we deploy our technology, it was really broken down into 4 key areas. I think that first one is really the critical key to all of this. And it's really that discovery, design, and engagement. And if I think back to this initial process, we spent many months interacting with a lot of key stakeholders across many different levels within the business to really make sure that we understood those stakeholders, to really make sure we understood our customers' business, and also the challenges that we were faced. The second part was then, working with our customers' IT team to actually develop an integration plan to work out, what was the software that we needed to integrate with, and how do we actually deploy our product to make sure that we can actually get our application installed on 500 workstations across the network here in Australia. The third bucket is really around that change management and onboarding. And I think this is really where behavioral science comes into play quite a lot. I think if we look at our product and a lot of the feedback we get from clinicians is that it is very easy to use, it's very intuitive. And so a lot of my focus was really around, well, how do we overcome this whole conversation of being resistant to change and being resistant to adopt AI? And then obviously the final one is, following that initial go live, how do we make sure we're really driving that product adoption and really ongoing success for our customer? So if I look at our journey towards clinical adoption, we really started with that discovery process. It was, a couple of months worth of a lot of work, really making sure that we understood our customers' business as much as possible. We also early in the piece conducted a pilot of our product. So over the course of 6 weeks, we worked with a core group of key opinion leaders to actually test our product out and get their initial feedback before we would then look to roll the product out across the wider enterprise to the 300 odd radiologists. During this time, we had an opportunity to communicate with our radiologists and our end users. And I think that is where it presents a prime opportunity to actually really leverage behavioral science strategies to create momentum and to potentially nudge some of those users into using the product. This entire process in the end actually took 9 months, but with really great results in the end. And we're really starting to see that adoption continuing today. And I'll share some of those results later on. So I think, when you are redesigning or designing a customer experience for the first time, as I mentioned, it's really about uncovering those key insights, and that's done through a really deep discovery process. So we conducted stakeholder interviews, feedback sessions, meetings, but we also deployed a number of surveys and really gathered some hard data around what our radiologists thought about our product. Some of the key insights that really came out of that process was that, to be honest, a lot of clinicians had never actually heard of our company. I think when we started this process, we had only really implemented our new website a few months prior. And so there was this real lack of knowledge and understanding of who we actually were. I think that the second one there is really around the fact that a lot of radiologists were still really skeptical about the value of AI. I think if we look at clinicians, incredibly intelligent people that have worked incredibly hard to get to where they are. And so there was this level of skepticism around it. And also, I suppose, with that, a level of resistance. I think the other point to make here is that a lot of feedback we had received was that prior experiences with other vendors in this space had actually been quite poor. And so I think that left a lot of clinicians with a lack of confidence in what we were trying to do. There was also a sense of a lack of confidence in their own internal support team as well. And there were questions around, deploying this new technology for the first time, are we going to run into technical problems? And then I think the final one was really around the use of the product. Is it actually going to slow me down? At the end of the day, as the demand for radiology services increases, we couldn't have a solution that would effectively slow down clinicians. And so that was something else to be really mindful of. I think the other point to make here is being really clear on what that customer journey looks like and really making sure that you've mapped out those key moments of truth. Where are those opportunities where things can actually go, can sour and go really bad? Or where are those opportunities that can really solidify you as, being this leader with your product or service? And so I think with all of that in mind, it really helps to understand what is the current state of the experience of the customer and where do we want to ultimately end up getting to? What does that end state or that future state look like? And where can we actually look at using behavioral science strategies to help us get to that point? And so that brings me to the second half of my presentation and really looking at some of these behavioral science strategies to really drive adoption of new technologies, particularly with AI. And so what I want to do now is just walk through some of those different strategies that we utilized, 5 in particular, and how we actually looked at putting that into practice. So the first one is social norms. We know that humans are social creatures and we're highly influenced by what others do. I think if we look at healthcare professionals, clinicians more specifically, this is certainly the case. I think certainly within radiology, the way that we sell our solutions is really through word of mouth. The radiologist will look to a colleague working at a different hospital to see what type of equipment they are using to get their feedback. And so social norms is really critical within the radiology industry. I think the second piece to this is that there's really no social norms created for AI. We are really very early on in the adoption process. And so part of it is actually about creating what those social norms are. So the second part is, well, what can we do? And I think to this point, it's really about promoting a range of activities and initiatives, that really highlight to your target audience, this is something that I should be getting behind. And I think to that point, there's a couple of things that you can do. I think relating the norm to your target audience as much as possible so that they can identify with it is obviously is critical. considering social networks, and we'll touch on this in a few slides' time, but really understanding and mapping out your stakeholders and understanding where within those social networks do you potentially have really strong informal networks. And then the final point there is the fact that norms may need reinforcing over time. I think if we put this into practice, I think the first one is creating a coalition of KOLs and supporters, and this is certainly what we did with our initial pilot. I think sharing experience and testimonials of like-minded individuals, but also showcasing involvement of a broad range of people. I think in any kind of group, be it 350 radiologists, there's obviously different types of personalities, and so making sure you're actually sharing those different stories and experiences from different types of people so that people within that group can certainly relate to it. And finally, using data wherever possible. So if we have a look at some of the things that we actually did, first and foremost was really sharing those testimonials. So if I look back at our initial pilot and working with a group of key opinion leaders, we really had an opportunity very early on to actually get some really great testimonials and actually then disperse that amongst the group. The second one was following our pilot. We actually ran a number of webinars, and this was really well attended by the group. So over 200 radiologists attended, and one of our key opinion leaders actually shared some really great results that we had from our pilot. In particular, looking at how AI actually really drives material benefits in terms of patient management. So again, something that clinicians could really identify with. That third and final example there was really about sharing adoption results. So once we had deployed the product across the enterprise, we actually conducted a survey at the time, and we wanted to get feedback from the end users. The results we got back were quite significant and quite remarkable. And we actually used that as a way to inform the entire group as to how the product had been adopted. And the whole focus and purpose of that was to really continue to create that groundswell and momentum. And certainly for those radiologists who might still be on the periphery or who still might be a little bit resistant to the technology, how do we make sure that this can really speak to them and they can actually get on board with it if they haven't already? I think the other point to make here, and I mentioned it before, is really making sure that you're relating the norms to your target audience as much as possible. You might want to know what Hotel Tales has to do with the adoption of AI, but there was this really interesting study that was performed which looked at how you can actually change your messaging so that you are really making sure you're targeting your key audience. This particular study started with, in a first experiment, creating messaging which spoke about protecting the environment. And they found that 35% of hotel guests actually recycled their towels. The second experiment actually looked at then showing how other hotel guests recycled. So, what was the behavior of other hotel guests? They found that when they used that type of messaging, it actually increased to 44%. They then took it another step, and they actually then shared the experiences of hotel guests within the specific room that a hotel guest was staying within. And again, that then jumped up to almost 50% of hotel guests actually recycling their towels. So I think it's a really good example which highlights that if you can really target your audience as much as possible, you will start to see those benefits and results. The second type of behavioral science strategy we used was messenger. So I think it's really important to think about not only what you're actually messaging, but who is actually communicating that information. I think we often look to authoritative type figures, or who are in a position of expertise to actually, put into practice what they're actually saying. And so what you can do in this instance is really making sure that you're sharing communication from those stakeholders who sort of sit in a senior or authoritative type role. I think the other piece to it is also being really mindful of peer networks as well. So how can you actually leverage perhaps those people within a group that don't necessarily have the title of a clinical director or a general manager, but who have extensive experience, who are really well respected, and through that process have those really strong informal networks as well. And so what we did in this instance was we actually, a lot of the communication we developed, but worked very closely with the CEO and the chief medical officer, who are both, very well-respected individuals in the industry, both very well experienced to actually communicate what we needed them to do. And certainly the results of our enterprise deployment survey was certainly a really good example of this. I think it's one thing for me to be communicating these results to our group of radiologists, but if that is to come from the chief medical officer, it really has that sort of credence and significance to it. The third one is really around salience. So, we are often bombarded with a whole host of different pieces of information, and we're really only likely to absorb that information that is simple and directly relatable to us. And so I think to that point, it's really about personalizing evidence as much as possible. And when we put that into practice, again, we use customer testimonials, So for one of our KOLs, he really spoke about how in using this particular product, it could actually help him detect things he might otherwise miss because he's often interrupted throughout the course of his day. And this was something that a lot of other radiologists spoke about. I think if we look at their daily practice, they're continually interrupted by other technical staff, other administrative staff. And so what that means is, they're not having a consistent reporting experience. With this type of technology, they actually have that reassurance that if they come back to a particular exam, they've actually got effectively, a second opinion or someone sort of looking over their shoulder to help guide them. And so again, it's really about using that language that other clinicians can really relate to. The fourth one is really around ego and protecting our sense of self. I think, if we look at AI in particular, particularly within healthcare, there is this threat to a person, this thought that this technology is effectively going to replace me. What does that mean for me as someone who has spent many years, studying and really becoming a specialist in this field? And so as a result, I think immediately a lot of our radiologists, can actually feel disempowered, defensive and disengaged. And so I think to this point, it's really important to think about your framing and positioning. And to that point, we put a lot of thought into, how we position our product. We've positioned our product as, a decision support tool. We want to make sure that clinicians still feel empowered to make that ultimate decision. And we've certainly used this messaging as part of our onboarding process as well. So something that I continue to highlight is that AI is not 100% accurate. And we share examples where the software actually gets it wrong and ultimately needs a human to make that final diagnosis. And I think when radiologists start using the product, they very soon start to realize, actually, in fact, this is not capable of replacing me, but it's actually a really good adjunct to all the other tools that I can use to actually make the best diagnosis for this particular patient. The final strategy is being really mindful of availability heuristics. So, what are those memories or those events that particular people sort of shortcut to or quickly remember? And, this often happens, if a type of scenario either happens often or if there's sort of some lasting impact on our minds. If I think to our particular scenario and deploying our technology, there was really two key insights that came through in talking to a range of different stakeholders. And the first one was really having this lack of confidence in their own technical support team. So if they ran into any technical issues, they would often contact their support desk and they wouldn't necessarily get the information or get the resolution that they needed. And so as a result of that, we put in place a really robust training program, but also made sure that we stayed really close to the support team for the first initial 3 months, really making sure that if a radiologist encountered any issues, they had all of the information, the training, the knowledge to very quickly resolve this issue and thereby actually make sure that the radiologist has a great experience. The second one was this general lack of confidence in service delivery from other vendors. I think during the discovery process, there are a number of instances where radiologists said, this particular provider, they came in, they delivered this technology and then they left. And so we really wanted to almost create this new memory for our end users, for our radiologists, to really overcome that. And so part of the strategy was really making sure that we had, a high touch service delivery. We really stayed close to our clinicians and our users and really made sure that we were there to support them every step of the way. And so these are just some of the results. So this was the feedback survey that we actually deployed once we had rolled the product out across the entire enterprise. I think a couple of really key metrics that came out here. First and foremost, 7 out of 10 radiologists would actually be disappointed if this technology was removed from clinical practice. So a really good result, and really highlighted that the radiologists saw real sort of benefits in the product. The other two that I've actually highlighted there focuses on the technical issues. So we found that 3/4 never actually, in fact, encountered any technical problems. And that was, I think, a really good result of what we had actually put into our implementation plan, but also our robust training program for the technical support staff. The final one there was really around impact to reporting time. So as I mentioned early on, we found that a lot of radiologists were really concerned that this technology would actually slow them down. We actually found that 75% of radiologists actually felt that there had been no change to their reporting time. And in fact, 25% actually felt that it had actually sped them up. So again, a really good result that we could actually celebrate. And we used these results to actually communicate this to the wider group. As I mentioned before, for any of those radiologists who might have been sitting on the periphery, who still might have been resistant to the technology, it was an opportunity for them to actually start to see the benefits, start to see what their other colleagues were talking about, and get on board if they hadn't already. And this slide here just shows the active monthly users. So over the course of following the go live in sort of April and May, we've started to see this sort of steady increase in radiologists adopting the technology. Certainly we started with an initial group, but through that process, because the business is so large and there's a lot of part-time workers, there are some workers who work overseas, there was naturally a case where we were going to miss some people as part of that initial rollout process. But I think what this really highlights is that through all of the work that we did post the initial go live in really creating that engagement and groundswell, we've actually started to continue to see that number increase over time. So if you are thinking about looking at behavioral science and what you can do to really drive adoption of your products, these are just some resources that I found really helpful before. And I'd certainly encourage you as a sort of a starting point to have a read of these particular books. And so with that, I'd just like to really thank everyone for your time today. I hope it has been insightful and you've learned something. Certainly my details on the screen there, so I'm more than happy to connect with any individuals who'd like to understand more about what we did, or if you've got any questions for me. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. It's a really awesome presentation. I suppose I'm pretty sure that everyone learns a lot. I can see a lot of people coming from different places, from like Philadelphia, that's US, that's pretty late. Someone from Philippines, Australia, Singapore. We're just giving some time for people to put on the question on the chat. I'm gonna kick things off with a question that I saw pretty frequently yesterday to see if you have some sort of behavioral science approach to
Sure.
this. So what were your top tips facing a frustrated customer? Do you have some recommendations for it?
I think the first thing is really understanding what is the root cause of those frustrations. Really understanding what is, where is that actually coming from? And again, what's in it for them? What does that end result look like? And how can we actually help to guide them, to that process? So yeah, I think that's probably really it. First and foremost, staying very close to your customer, doing that deep discovery, really understanding, what is that cause for friction, and then working out, okay, what is the best way to go from here? if we look at behavioral science, I think that's where we can actually bring in and introduce other users who've been using the product. If it's about something in particular, what has been your experience, Dr. Bob? How can you actually provide some feedback and some testimonials as to how you sort of overcome this and sort of help to bring them into the conversation as well?
Yep. Thanks, Mark. We got someone. Thanks mainly for joining in. What an interesting challenge, the rise of AI, machine learning, etc. How have you found the shift in resistance in the healthcare sectors?
Yeah, so I think really great question there. I mean, if I look back to a conference that I attended in North America, the largest radiology conference we have every year about 5 years ago, there was this real resistance. As I mentioned earlier on, a lot of people, a lot of radiologists, there was these conversations that, machines, robots are going to replace us. And so I think naturally there was a lot of resistance from the industry that, we really don't want this technology. I think over time, that started to shift. But as I showed, even with the research, even as recent as last year, again, there is still this real fear towards AI. What I have found over the last 18 months is that once you actually get the product in the hands of clinicians, they actually start to see, what, this isn't actually going to replace me. This here is a tool that can actually help me to do my job better. And I think that's part of the process, really getting them to actually use the product and understand the benefits it's going to bring, but also have that light bulb moment to go, actually, do you know what? It's got some shortcomings. So therefore, it's not going to put me out of a job. I think the other piece to the resistance that we've discovered is really education is key. And generally this fear of AI comes down to a lack of understanding what the technology can and can't do. And so that's something else that we're also really working on here at Annalise AI, is how do we make sure that we're really educating our customers, not only about our product, but really about artificial intelligence in general.
Thanks for that. Yes, thanks, Izumi. I hope I pronounced your name right. So the hotel tower example was very interesting. How could we identify how to narrow down the message? Is it demonstrating what others are doing to key?
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to that target audience, right? How do you go from being or using quite general type messaging and make it really as specific as possible and salient to me? I think in hindsight, when I look at the group of radiologists that we were deploying our technology to, 350 radiologists. Within that group, you have a number of radiologists who have a specialty area. And I think in hindsight, for our first product, our chest X-ray, perhaps we could have targeted our messaging more towards those radiologists that actually report chest X-rays on a regular basis. So yeah, I think it's about trying to be sort of general in your approach and really being specific to that customer that you really want to try and adopt your technology and you really try to want to nudge. And I think, again, it really comes back to that discovery process, really understanding who is your customer, what are their pain points, what are the things that keep them up at night, and how can you leverage those really great insights.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for all those questions and comments. That was incredibly interesting, and thanks for the insight again, Mark.
Wonderful.
Is there anything that you have done differently in hindsight of implementing this project?
Really great question. I think in hindsight, what we could have done better was certainly the education piece. I think our onboarding really focused on the product and the functionality and the benefits. But I think through this process, what I've learned is that AI in general, and particularly within healthcare, is a bit of an enigma. It's really not understood. And so I think the key learning there would have been to take a lot of our customers through that journey and really making sure we're educating on AI in general. And that's certainly something that we are looking at here at Annalise AI, is really being a leader in that education piece as well.
Yes, thanks. Derek and Pooja, I'm going to read out your questions. So in medical field context, saying your product is not 100% accurate sounds risky. Considering you are dealing with patients' medical conditions, if clients bring this up, how would you address it?
Yeah, really, really great question. I think the way that we address this is that we actually ran a clinical validation study. So we actually had, and we published this in the Lancet Digital Health Journal last July, so a very respected journal. In this particular clinical study, what we looked at was a group of radiologists who had to report a series of chest x-rays without the use of AI. And then there was a 3-month washout period where they went away. They came back and reported the same chest x-rays, but with the use of our product. What we found in that second part of the clinical study was that their accuracy actually significantly increased. We saw that there was a reduction in their accuracy when they actually weren't working with this product. So I really bring it back to this point, is that whilst AI may not be 100% accurate, there are going to be opportunities where it actually misses things. If we look at the performance of a radiologist alone, we also know that they are going to miss things as well, and their accuracy is actually potentially less than actually working alongside an AI product. So I think that's really the messaging to use, and really making sure you have that hard data, really making sure that you have those results to really support those conversations. So I hope that helps.
Yep, thanks, Derek. And we got Pooja here. Thank you, Mark, for your presentation. This is super helpful. He or she works in a startup which help create AI opportunities for industrial manufacturers for aftermarket parts and services sales. So he or she can relate with the entire presentation. That's great, Mark. So
Wonderful.
One question for you on these strategies, do you use this during onboarding or post go live, or during marketing, or all of them above, like testimonials, video stuff?
Yeah, so really great question. I've used these strategies, across all of those areas. I think customer testimonials from users work really well, particularly from a marketing point of view. As I mentioned, healthcare professionals, clinicians are social people. They are going to listen to what other clinicians actually say. So we certainly use that as part of our marketing efforts. But then as also part of that post-onboarding process, I think, one of the really great things that we did was make sure that we shared those results of our initial survey with the purpose that it would actually help to continue to drive adoption. So absolutely. And I think the other point to make there is the onboarding. I think being really clear on what your messaging is. When I do onboarding and training sessions, I really highlight the fact that these are the benefits for you, and we understand that these are your pain points, but also that messaging around the fact that the AI is not 100% accurate as well. So you can absolutely use it across, multiple areas of the customer journey.
Thank you. Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Minli. Thanks for everyone. If there's no further questions, I'll gonna end up this session. Thanks, Mark. I can see there's some great engagement and great presentations. Thanks for doing this with us again.
Fantastic, Ryan. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And as I mentioned, if anyone's got any further questions about this, I'm more than happy to have further conversations and talk further about this. By all means, please reach out and connect to me on LinkedIn. But otherwise, have a great day and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Mark. I'll see you all in the next session. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Ryan. Take care.
See you soon. Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mansa, Kamili, Izumi, Pooja. Sorry, can't read out all the names. And Nilis, Derek.